when you go into elections and you come out of elections, post-election, we see a lot of cases that come up. But recently, there's been a reduction in the cases that we've seen come out in the post-election period. Of course, this will speak a lot of on what INEC is doing right and what is doing wrong. If there are mistakes, more mistakes, we find more court cases. But from your point of view, electoral offenses, special commission to prosecute for INEC or electoral offenses, what are your thoughts on this?
In all honesty, I think it's one of the major recommendations of the Waste Panel, and it's one that I support 100%. We need it. We have to understand the importance of elections in our democracy. And if we accept the importance, then we must get it right. It's important that people, I mean, you heard him say that Anambra, they had 100,000 multiple voters. There's nobody going to prosecute them. So it means the next time around, you're probably going to have 500,000. So until people see that you're prosecuted, and the reality is that INEC cannot do that. We need to have a commission. I'm not saying there has to be a tribunal, but there must be a commission in place whose job it is to prosecute, to investigate and prosecute. People say they won't do it. I say they have to do it because that's why they're set up. They may not do it 100%, but you know, even if we get 50%, we'll be making progress. What you have in our system today is that nobody gets prosecuted for violence on election day. Yes, they take them to the police.
And we see that happen, I mean, even the run-up to elections, we see that happen.
Even in primaries of political parties, nothing happens.
What does this speak? I mean, you're a politician. You need to, you know the mentality of your supporters and those who participate in election activities. What's the mentality? Why do people want to be violent in elections?
Because they get their way with violence and nothing happens. And that's why something must happen. We must tell ourselves that violence is not the way. And the only way you can do that is to have people. The police cannot on its own do it. It's not a priority in that sense. You need a commission whose job it is to prosecute electoral offenses in this process.
So that brings me to the issue. A lot of people have argued that somewhat our elections have been militarized. We see a lot of military presence. Even the last, I mean, some of the few governorship elections that we've had, we've seen so much of military presence. I mean, what effect do you think this has on voting?
It's not good for voting. In fact, when you talk about free and fair, when you have a military setting, you cannot really say it is free and fair. But then we're coming from a military setup, and we can't take that away from our system. And so you're going to have a lot of this. And, you know, Nigerians believe, again, that you can force your way and get things done, and nothing is going to happen to you. And so the police themselves have not been able alone, and so they've added the military to join them. It's a phase. It's a phase. But by the time you get things right, then there'll be no need for violence.
Interesting.
And that's why that you have violence and you get away with it, is that it's because we're not yet there.
Well, let me go to our Abuja studio where Mr. Olumide Osaze-Uzzi is standing by. Tell us, we've talked about the issue of militarization and the issue of a special commission to prosecute electoral offenders. But tell us, when it comes to independence of the commission and the law which provides how far the commission can go, how independent is INEC?
As independent as the law allows it to be, I believe. In its operational activities, generally speaking, it has been fairly independent. It has been independent. We're not subject to the direction or control of any person or authority, whether the legislative or the executive or any other authority or person. But fair enough, we derive our funds from the Consolidated Revenue Fund, which is an achievement from the 2010 reforms. It would have been good if in its other operational activities, it is enshrined in the Constitution that the commission should be completely and totally independent. Now we have we do not take dictation from anybody at all, but we are subject to the usual vagaries. We are subject to the judiciary, subject to the legislative because we have legislative oversight functions, and subject in one sense that when we submit budgets, it is subject to be moderated because there are conflicting priorities. And because there are conflicting priorities, sometimes what we ask for is not necessarily what we get. So, but apart from that, in its operational activities, it is quite independent.
Interesting. One we may want to ask that the INEC chairman is appointed by the president, isn't it? In other climes, we find a situation that it's not so. So in this case, what would you, if you are to ask for something different? And also, if you look at the budget of INEC, it's under the presidency also. To this extent, if you are to ask for a change in that regard, what would you be asking for as a commission?
Well, let us be careful when we say in other climes they're different. Each country, because of its history, because of the socioeconomic realities, has a different law. In Scandinavia, for example, and most of Europe, there is no independent agency to conduct elections. Very often, the Home Secretary conducts or superintends the process. Usually, that person is the Home Secretary, or Minister for Internal Affairs that is involved in the elections. So it's not so much the appointing authority. I have read several commentaries say maybe you should shift it from the executive and allow it to be made by the National Assembly. Well, that may be so. We don't particularly have a particular stand who should do the appointing. But do you remove it from one politician, one set of politicians, and move it to another set of politicians? Does it cure what you're trying to cure? Does it address the issues you're trying to address? People have suggested the NJC, National Judicial Council, maybe should do the appointments. But people forget that some members of the National Judicial Council are actually appointed by the president as well. The Chief Justice of the country is appointed by the president, notwithstanding the fact that it's subject to confirmation by the National Assembly, by the Senate. In the same way that he appoints the INEC chairman also and commissioners, but also subject to confirmation by the National Assembly. I think the Ways panel suggested that the NJC should do the appointments, and it's the South African model where the job is advertised and people apply. It's often referred to. Personally, I think the integrity and competency of the person you appoint goes a long way to affect the quality of the elections you get. So I'm not aware that the Commission has any official line on who does the appointments.
Interesting. Mr. Agbaje, you are on the sideline in terms of this particular issue. But as a politician, what do you feel? Is INEC that independent from your own point of view?
Well, it is independent to a great extent. It can never be 100% independent for obvious reasons. But I think we all tend to look at INEC alone and forget about the states. Now, the fear, you see, in having the executive appoint the head of INEC or the head of an electoral body is that it could deliberately appoint the wrong person. Now, in the case of Jega, to the best of my knowledge, was a good choice. It was generally acceptable to Nigerians at the time he was appointed. But can we say the same for the states? And so when you give the powers to the head of the executive, so to say, you are leaving it such an important task. And that's why I would rather go with the Ways Committee recommendation, that we need to institutionalize those who lead. Yes, they've made a good choice in Ejega, but what's going to happen next time round? If you take a cue from the states, you see that the state electoral bodies are far from independent. And so, these are the things you're running away from in allowing, say, the president to appoint. There must be some kind of process that does not put everything in his court. Yes.
All right, interesting.
Yes.
But this particular issue has been on the floor of the National Assembly, and the senators are doing their bits to make sure that they scrutinize, they amend, they raise some concerns about this issue. I will allow you to watch one or two of their debates on this. It's past the second reading. And what should they be looking at again? When we come back, we hear more.
And it's not cost efficient. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, taking a look at the colossal amount of money with which INEC executed state election 2011 and all previous elections in the country, this can be reduced by a third, taking into consideration 3 election weeks, which will now hold in just 1 day, going by our proposed amendment.
INEC itself has repeatedly said, and in the same lecture that I attended, the chairman of INEC also said the same thing, that INEC does not have the logistic capacity to conduct elections in 1 day.
Holding all elections in 1 day will be a recipe for confusion, a big recipe. It's not that anybody is afraid of losing an election.
All right, interesting. You can hear debate here and there on the Electoral Act. But before we close, let me quickly come to you, Mr. Oluwole, and in 1 minute, just tell me, you've heard what the debate has been all about. It's past the second reading. On a last thought of yours on the program, tell us, what should Nigerians be looking at, and the lawmakers also, as regards the flaws in our Electoral Act?
Well, I hope that they will accept the reforms proposed by the Commission because they've been well thought of, and I think they will go a long way in enhancing the process. As for the last clip you played on the held elections on 1 day, we think the law should stand as it should remain as it stands, and that is give that discretion to the Commission. When it does have the capacity and the logistics capacity to conduct all elections in 1 day, I assure you, too, we're moving towards there. In 2011, we conducted elections on three separate electoral days. Now we have made them to 2 electoral days, one for federal elections, the second one for the state elections.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Oluwole. Let me ask you, just in a minute, tell us, from all of these that we've talked about, what should we be looking at generally?
I think what we're looking forward to is free and fair elections. Free in the sense that there's freedom to vote and be voted for with little violence, have the benefit of a secret ballot in the real sense of the word. Fair in the sense that there's a level playing field and that INEC is an independent and unbiased umpire.
Interesting. Thank you so much for your thoughts. I can see your tweets and your messages. Unfortunately, time is not on our side on the program tonight. But thank you anyways for sending those, Mr. Agbaje. Thank you for coming on the program. And Mr. Olumide Osaze-Uzzi, the Director of Publicity and Voter Education with INEC. Thank you, everyone. On behalf of the team, my name is Chima Nnaji. Next time, have a wonderful time.